Now that we've covered Group A strep, we'll move on to Group B strep. You'll want to pay special attention to the tests we use to differentiate the two. Another name for Group B strep is Strep A galactiae, but in the universe of Sketchy Micro, A galactiae will be known as A galactic baby. So let's get going. The scene will take place in outer space. While we draw the planets and space backdrop, I thought it'd be appropriate to play a segment of the 2001 Space Odyssey soundtrack. Have a listen. If you didn't recognize it, it was a selection from one of the movie's 88 Minutes of Silence. Maybe not the best song on the soundtrack, but the license was way cheaper. So we're almost done drawing our galactic baby. And done. We chose to use a baby for the main theme of the story because Group B strep causes really serious infections in newborns, so that's the first thing we want you to think of. Now let's give Galactic Baby his sidekick, this stuffed animal. Notice it's a hippo. This is to indicate that A galactiae has a positive hippurate test, which means it hydrolyzes sodium hippurate. This is just a random fact that can come up on a test, and for the most part you'll only see it mentioned when talking about Group B strep. And around the hippo, we're drawing a clear capsule-shaped helmet. This will represent Strep A galactiae's polysaccharide capsule. Now we're drawing some tents to add a space camp. The space camp will symbolize that Group B strep is camp test positive. The camp test distinguishes A galactiae from all other streps, including Strep pyogenes. It has nothing to do with cyclic AMP, it simply means that when GBS is plated with Staph aureus, it has an increasing zone of hemolysis. So that you remember what the camp test is, we made the tent poles resemble the golden staff that Moses carries in our Staph aureus segment. Just like Group A strep, Group B strep is also beta hemolytic. And this differentiates those two from Strep pneumo and viridans, which are alpha hemolytic. We'll use the same symbol we've been using for beta hemolysis and add the red beta hemolysis light bulbs on all of the tents. This will give our space camp a more futuristic look. Remember that we said Pyogenes was bacitracin sensitive and represented it with a basset hound being able to lick and munch on the pastries? Well, Group B strep is bacitracin resistant, which is another important way of differentiating it from Group A strep. We'll use the basset hound as a symbol for bacitracin again, because what's outer space without space dogs? And to represent resistant, we'll draw him wearing a helmet, but have him licking the inside of his helmet. Thus, the baby is resistant to being licked by the basset hound. So the main concern, and the first thing you should really think of when you hear Group B strep, is that it causes meningitis in neonates. It's actually the #1 cause of meningitis in neonates. So we'll represent meningitis by drawing this special meningitis space helmet. We'll continue to use this galactic baby helmet in future drawings to represent meningitis. Group B strep is also a common cause of sepsis in neonates. To represent this, we'll color the baby's clothes red. And finally, Group B strep also causes pneumonia, so we'll draw our baby coughing. Now we'll draw a mothership, which is going to help us teach the rest of our drawing. So just to reinforce the idea of the camp test, which is important for Group B strep, we're drawing this red arrow on the spaceship. If you imagine the spaceship as a petri dish, this red arrow is what the camp test will look like. The arrow head is the arc that forms at the point of intersection between the plated Group B strep and Staph aureus. Now let's pretend the mothership is in fact the baby's mother. The way the neonate gets Group B strep infection is when it passes through the vaginal canal of the mother during delivery. And this is represented in the drawing if you just use your imagination and pretend that this tunnel is the vaginal canal and the baby just passed through it. Part of mom's prenatal care is that she has her vagina and rectum swabbed for Group B strep at 35 weeks to see if she's colonized. So we'll write 35 WK, or 35 weeks, on the side of the ship. Again, this is to remind you that all pregnant women need to be swabbed at 35 weeks to see if they're colonized for Group B strep. Let's say the mother is determined to be colonized. Then how do you prevent the baby from getting a terrible GBS infection? Well, you give mom intrapartum penicillin. This is very important, and you'll very likely come across this test question at some point during your studies, so we're going to make it very, very obvious. The landing legs that the mothership has will be pencils, and they're stabbing into the mother. The pencils are the symbol for penicillin, and since we are showing the baby coming out of the vaginal canal, we know this is intrapartum. So again, we know that prophylaxis against GBS infection is given to mom intrapartumly. And that wraps up Group B strep. I hope you've enjoyed this one.